Hey everybody, how's it going? This is a sermon reflection on what I preached on this past week. I preached on a title called When God Feels Far. I've been sitting with this sermon a little longer than I expected. It's Friday already. I usually try to do this by Wednesday. And that's not because the ideas are complicated, but because, the application is uncomfortable. Preaching Psalm 13 is one thing, but praying it is another. What's been bothering me is realizing how when I pray, I edit so much. I don't necessarily lie to God, but I definitely filter and I soften things up, I clean things up, I choose words that sound faithful, even when that's not exactly how I feel. Psalm 13 doesn't give David that option. He doesn't warm up, he doesn't explain himself, he doesn't start with perspective, he just says, how long? If I'm honest, that's usually the part I skip. Not because I don't feel it, but because I don't always feel allowed to say what I want to say. Even though I know better, the challenging thing for me personally is when God feels far, my instinct isn't usually to pray more, honestly, but to think my way out of it, or stay busy, or tell myself it'll pass. Sometimes I even wait until I feel more spiritual before I pray. And Psalm 13 does the exact opposite. It says, pray while God feels far. Pray before you understand. Pray before anything changes. And that's harder than it sounds because honest prayers means that I have to sit with disappointment instead of managing it. And for me, I don't like sitting with disappointment. I like fixing things, tinkering with things. I reframe things, or at least explain them. But Psalm 13 doesn't give David an explanation. It gives him a way to stay in relationship with God. And that's what I'm stuck with right now. David doesn't get answers in the psalm. He doesn't get clarity. He doesn't get a timeline. What he gets is enough of God to keep going. And that's what's challenging me. Because I like answers. I like things to make sense. But Psalm 13 reminds me that sometimes faith isn't moving forward because things make sense. It's moving forward because God is still trustworthy, even when they don't. Another thing that's been weighing on me is how long actually lasted. I did a little more research. It wasn't just a rough week or a short season. David waited for years, and that changes how I hear Psalms. Because now it isn't about getting through something quickly. It's about learning how to stay faithful when the waiting doesn't seem to end. Psalm 13 suggests that honest worship looks less like constant emotional victory, but more like quiet, stubborn trust. The kind that doesn't look impressive. The kind that refuses to walk away. That line, but I trust in your unfailing love, means more to me now. See, nothing has changed yet when David said it. It wasn't a celebration. That was anchoring where he needs to be. And that's where this sermon is really hitting me this past week. Not how do I feel better, but what am I anchoring my faith to when I don't? And that's why communion mattered so much after the message this past Sunday. Communion isn't for people who feel spiritually strong. It's for people who are still waiting. It reminds me that even when God feels far, he has already come near in Christ. Even when I don't feel held, I am. Even when prayers feel unanswered, God hasn't gone anywhere. So here's what I'm actually trying to live this week. Not just preach, but I'm trying to stop editing my prayers, to bring one real disappointment to God. Not the version I'd be comfortable sharing publicly, but the real one. And to pray Psalm 13 in my own words. Not polished, not impressive, just honest. Because God can handle the truth. And sometimes the most faithful thing we can do is keep praying honestly until trust finds its voice again. That's what I want to share with you this week. Have a great weekend, everyone. So another video will come talking about Sunday's sermon. Until then, have a great day. Bye-bye.